Drag racing has been a growing sport for many years now, and racers every year are trying to make their cars go faster and faster. And really the only way to do that today is using one of three power adders. Now these power adders can start off fairly cheap and get very expensive. Now the first power adder we're going to talk about is nitrous. Now this upfront cost is going to be very cheap, but in the long run you're going to have to get refills, which is going to lead to more and more cost in the end. And it can get pretty expensive because right now we're in a nitrous shortage and it's pretty expensive and tough to get your hands on right now. But nitrous, what it does is it injects basically 2 parts nitrogen, 1 part oxygen into the motor, and at a certain temperature the atoms split, which causes more oxygen in the cylinder, which means more power. The more oxygen you can put into a motor, the more power you can get out of it, because you can add more fuel, you can add more timing, which means more power. Now, the bad thing about nitrous is it's unpredictable. It's essentially an explosion that happens in the cylinder. So if everything is not perfect in your motor, when you spray the nitrous, catastrophic things can happen. You can literally melt a piston down to a liquid, or you can send the rods that are in your motor through the bottom out of the oil pan. These are things that you do not want to do at the track. The officials will not be happy with you. Now, nitrous is a great power adder as long as everything is right. It can make lots of horsepower. It can make a car very fast. But there's also another power adder that is called superchargers. Now, superchargers are different than nitrous because nitrous is a gas, where a supercharger is a physical application that you put on the motor. That causes air to be forced into the motor. Now, superchargers run off the crank pulley of a motor. So as the motor turns, the supercharger turns as well, which forces air into the motor. Like I said, with nitrous, the more oxygen and more air you can put into a motor, the more power you can make. Now, some of the downsides of superchargers is they can be very heavy. I mean, some of the superchargers that you put on motors can be anywhere from 40, 50, 60, 70, upwards of 100 pounds. It adds a lot of weight, and with that weight also comes heat. With more heat, it decreases the efficiency of a motor, which derates horsepower. Now, there are 3 different kinds of superchargers. You have a screw blower, a roots blower, and a centrifugal supercharger. Now, the roots blower takes 2 rotors and spins them together and draws air from the top and forces it down the bottom. A centrifugal looks like a turbo, but is belt driven, and a screw blower is kind of like a roots blower, but instead of it being rotors, they're more of a screw type, and they essentially pull air from the top and force it down the bottom as well. So they're very similar, just different designs in the rotors and screws. Now, roots blowers are great applications. They've been around for a long time, and they've been used. They originally started out on diesel motors and have now been pushed into gasoline motors, and now it's really what top fuel cars, the fastest cars in drag racing, use every day at the track. Superchargers are a great power adder, and they supply instant torque because they run off the engine's crankshaft. So as soon as the engine starts revving up, it starts pushing air into the motor. Now, which leads us to our third power adder, which is the turbo. Turbos are being more and more used today throughout drag racing and even everyday use, as they are very efficient. Turbos run off the motor's exhaust. So this is where you run into a slight problem with turbos with turbo lag. It takes a second for the engine to put out exhaust, which turns the turbo, which then pushes air into the motor. This causes a lag. Now, some racers can offset this lag with what's known as a two-step, where the engine comes up, it revs up to a certain RPM, which it starts putting out exhaust into the turbo, which spins the turbo, which forces air into the motor. This gives more power off the line and quicker reaction times off the light, and just really creates a lot more power. Now, turbos are probably one of the most expensive power adders that you can buy for a car. Simply the fact that turbos are expensive to buy right off the bat, but you also need a lot of fabrication and plumbing work with exhaust and intercooler piping. And you're going to have to buy an intercooler as well of some sort, either an air-to-air intercooler, which uses air to cool off the air that the turbo is blowing into the motor, or an air-to-water intercooler, which uses a water circulating system to cool the air that the turbo is blowing into the motor. Now, turbos are great for power. Like I said, they're very efficient, unlike the rest of the power adders that I've mentioned. Now, turbos are a great product, and you can use 2 of them to even make more power and to spool up quicker, because usually with twin turbos, usually using smaller turbos. So now all these power adders are a great source. It really depends on what you're wanting. You know, if you want a cheap car, or not really a cheap car, but a little cheaper on the setup initially, you'd like to go with nitrous. Or if you're looking for, you know, more of an all-out race car, you know, instant power, then you might look at superchargers. Or if you want something that's going to be really efficient but still have a lot of power, a lot of fun, then you might look at turbos. It really just comes down to your preference. These are the 3 engine modifications, power adders that you're really going to need to be the fastest at the track. Either a blower, nitrous, or turbos. Without them, you're not going to be very fast. You still can be fast, but you definitely won't be the fastest at the track. So get one today, and you'll be on your way to the fastest at the track.